Well, hello, everybody. It's Marilyn Wilson here from RE Technology, and I'm super excited to talk to you today about a new series that we've just launched called the Tech Titans. And we've got one of those such titans with us today who's just recovering from major surgery and is becoming an even stronger titan, right? Good to see you, Dustin. So Dustin is currently the CEO of Milestones.ai, a company. If you haven't heard of them, I'm certainly you will be hearing about them shortly. They're doing some really cool stuff, but let's just jump right in. So Dustin, first, just tell us about, tell us about your background a little bit. Where'd you come from? What kind of, what's been your path in this crazy real estate world that we operate in?
Certainly not one that I expected. As a teenager, I landed an internship at a local real estate company in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I started answering the phones and had really no interest at all in doing much other than working there for a year and then moving on. And along the way, I started dabbling in internet marketing. Now, mind you, this is the mid-1990s, and internet marketing was kind of a new thing. And we started selling online listings and seeing commission checks. And then I started to get interested in real estate and technology at large. So I turned 18 and I went out and got a real estate license and became an apprentice as a realtor and kept that up all the way through college. So I was leasing buildings and selling land as a, late teens, early 20s. And I had this amazing mentor. His name was Gary, and he was totally obsessed over treating people well, nurturing relationships. He had a small but mighty fan base that came back to him over and over again. And at the same time, he was a bit of a techie and an early adopter of things, in spite of being in his mid-60s. So fast forward, I'm in my early 20s. I'd sort of put in my 10,000 hours to become knowledgeable enough about an industry. And around the time I finished undergrad, I went through the CCIM program because I thought that was kind of the logical next step if you were in commercial real estate, was to kind of get that last bit of education and get out there and go. And during that time, I launched a commercial MLS. And that was really a time when, CoStar was very small. LoopNet was kind of a marketplace, but didn't have the density of listings that a traditional MLS would have on the commercial real estate side. And we managed to get an investment from the commercial division of NAR and started building that MLS from a little storage closet on the 8th floor of the Realtor building in Chicago. So that was the start. It was completely accidental. It was not a career path I chose. It sort of unwittingly chose me. But 28 years later, here we are.
So you've been at this game for when you were a wee youngin'. I love it. That's terrific. Okay, so tell us, like,
you're old when you're older when these questions start with back in my day.
old days, when we had straw hats. Yeah, exactly. All right, so so let's just go from there then. So you started there, and then where did it take you? What's been your path between now and the ultimate inspiration to start Milestones.ai?
So it's kind of been a little bit of a bouncing back and forth between large companies and small companies. So I'd do a startup, I'd then transition from there to a public company or a big company. Grass is always greener, so then you kind of go back to the startup and then go back to a larger organization. So I've now worked in commercial prop tech, multifamily prop tech, and residential prop tech, and done about a half dozen companies, 3 of which were huge and 3 of which were small. And so that little startup that went out of the dorm room ended up being acquired by Moody's. From there, I went on to Deloitte and was a consultant and worked in global real estate, big projects, site selection, large scale CapEx stuff. And then I went over to RealPage. Most people have never heard of RealPage, but they're a giant in the multifamily space. It's a company that does everything related to apartment tech. It's a little larger than Zillow by revenue, just to put it in perspective. Wow. And for a little while, I was the head of operations at Realtor.com. And so that was the entry point for me into residential real estate. And while I was there, I kind of dreamed about being an entrepreneur again. And so here we went with Milestones about 4 years ago. So that was the path, large, small, ran the gamut, but the common denominator was all things related to real estate and mostly selling and managing buildings.
Well, that's amazing, though. That's such a depth to have and I'm sure you're bringing that to Milestone. So let's just talk in general about, because you obviously the Hotel California thing, you got in and you just kept going, right? You never went out of real estate at any part of your career. What do you love most about real estate technology?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, from the second you wake up, real estate shapes your world, right? So I think no matter where you are, everybody needs space to work, to live, to play. Doesn't matter what area of the world you are, it doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. Real estate is kind of the thing that consumes you all day long in one way or another. So just by virtue of that, it's interesting. And as an industry, we've been pretty slow to adopt technology. I've always been a person who's kind of interested in new things, but more improving process. And so what always attracted me was kind of the potential where you see this big, inefficient, complicated, very localized, very personalized thing. And you say, how can I apply what I know about tech or innovation to help people lead better lives? And that kind of spans a lot of things, right? It's the building, the buying, the moving, the selling, the operating, the owning of real estate. I think there's clear ways to make that better for everybody involved, right? This isn't sort of a zero-sum game where you win and somebody else loses. It's just that big and inefficient that there's gains to be had by everybody. So I like problems like that. And because the industry's so big, there's just no shortage of places to look around and say, okay, here's some real pain points, right? Because you want to be in business to really solve actual problems. You can look around and there's tons of problems to be solved. So, pick your corner and dig in. That's what's kept me here for so long, is I've never run out of stuff that just seems obvious that you could do to make an impact in people's lives for the better.
So my expression is you find the painkillers, not the vitamins, the things that really need to be fixed that are going to make a difference, and you go after it.
Case in point, this little example is 24 hours old, but we didn't have any water 24 hours ago. And it was because there was a tiny little spring and some valve connected to some pipe by the water main of our house that was 30 years old, and it just one day stopped working. And the second that happens, you head scratch, because we were in the middle of cooking dinner when we lost water. We were like, well, why? Well,
Right.
we're living in a 43-year-old house, which is about the average age of houses in this country. And when something as small as one little spring inside of one little valve of that house stops working, your family's kind of upside down. Without water, life grinds to a halt pretty quick. So herein, I think, lies the challenge, right? Most people encounter these little unpleasant surprises in their life, and they're like, oh my God, what do I do now? I'll pay anything to fix it. Or, to your point, this is the painkiller of, I have this thing, it's now a thorn in my side, what do I do? And I think that thing is happening across the world millions of times a day to millions of homeowners. And so why not dig in and make that a little better?
Love that. Yeah, for sure. So this is one I can't help but ask it, given the environment that we're in and within real estate at the moment. But what is your biggest area of worry right now? And what are you most optimistic about for the industry for the future?
Oof. As an analytical person, I probably worry a lot. As an entrepreneur, you got to be an optimist. So here's the yin and yang to that. I think if you're watching this interview, it's not a secret that the industry we're in is in this state of transformation or transition. And whenever you have that, generally it's painful. Change is not easy for anyone, right? So I think this is going to be challenging for the professionals in industry and for the consumers alike. So case in point, I read a Bloomberg article this morning, and renting is now cheaper than owning in every metro market in the United States.
Wow.
Every single one. So that's not like, if you're in the business of selling homes or originating mortgages, that's not what you want, but doesn't make it less true. So I think we've had this combination of worst case scenario with high interest rates, with high home prices for a while, with limited inventory, with commission lawsuits that have sort of cast a shadow of fear, uncertainty, and doubt over the whole industry. And, it's really flattened brokerage, mortgage, and title. And we're at this place where, probably half the industry has a bit of an existential reckoning. And if you're not willing to adapt how you do business, it's going to be really painful for you. And a lot of people will leave the industry. That's just, I think, reality is coming. It's already happening. in truth, we brought that upon ourselves, right? So long before we had this current downturn, so real estate's always been cyclical. We were an industry that operated far too transactionally. We didn't get close enough to our customers. Customers being the homeowner, right? Because the homeowner is the source for every dollar at the end of the day for the residential real estate industry. So as an industry, we spent a lot of time chasing online leads, and I hate to say it, but we let big tech get between industry and the consumers. And so that's got to course correct. My concern is that we as an industry sort of stay frozen. We bury our head in the sand, and this current downturn doesn't actually make us evolve. We look for band-aids, or some people just tap out. And I think that that's the biggest concern, is we miss the opportunity to finally go and pivot and get it right. Now, the optimist in me says, look, this is like the best industry in the world, highly entrepreneurial. And real estate's always had its peaks and valleys, but what's important is that, well, hobbyists will come and go. There's a group of entrepreneurs that are really passionate about homeownership, and they're able to adapt and pivot their business models and ultimately grow their market share. And from that vantage point, we want to help them thrive in this new world. That's my mission. And I think there's a great opportunity. The old saying, never let a crisis go to waste. This is that moment where people can say, okay, I'm going to really focus on getting it right.
I am totally with you, and I have exactly the same perspective. I'm worried right now because I see a lot of people trying to hold on for dear life, trying to think that things aren't really going to change. And what I love about what you're saying from the optimist perspective is this is a time to think about how you can benefit from this. How can whether it be a technology company, a real estate association, a multiple listing service, all these different groups, a brokerage, obviously, right? What can we do to I don't want to say take advantage, because that doesn't sound right either, but to really think through what opportunities does this open up for us that maybe when we were steeped in tradition for too long, we were not able to see or were not able to do. So I am totally with you. And that's my biggest worry, is I think people are not taking advantage of this great crisis. Much like in 2008, 9, 10, things could have evolved more quickly in that time frame as well, but people were just kind of holding on for dear life, so to speak. So I'm with you. I think we've got a lot of opportunity here, but we've got to sort of like let it go and just think from the positive perspective about how can these changes actually benefit us, benefit our clients, benefit our relationships with them. So totally with you on that. All right, so let's jump into Milestones a little bit. It's a fascinating company. It's always excited me to learn more about this. So tell us about, how did you decide to do Milestones? What inspired you to build it? Why is it here? And what do you think the benefits it's going to deliver to everybody?
Well, that's a lot to unpack. So to start off, Milestones, which we're actually renaming to Homeowner.ai.
Oh, nice.
It's long overdue, frankly, but it's about helping industry professionals get closer to consumers. So as the name kind of suggests, this is about delivering value to homeowners, not just when they're in the process of buying or selling or moving, which is a small percentage of the overall journey, but the whole thing. And when we think about this, the best analogy I can come up with is if you went to the doctor, you might have gotten a patient portal from your doctor, and they use that to communicate with you and collaborate on your health on a long, kind of ongoing basis. If you're a student, you probably have a student portal that follows you, through your tenure and then potentially beyond. Or if you're planning travel or banking, you've got portals for those things too. So kind of portals are everywhere.
Right.
A few years back, we said we should have homeowner portals that are really specific to what's under the roof. And it's both what and who is under the roof, right? So that relationship between a real estate professional and a consumer needs to persist way beyond, hey, want to sell your home, or let me guide you through the process, right? That's a very narrow moment in time. You've got, on average, a transaction that happens once a decade. And so if that transaction is a few months, how do you fill the void of the rest of the time? So the innovation we came up with was, let's build this kind of private environment that could be white labeled for real estate professionals, they're really the trusted steward of those relationships, certainly not us. And how could we use somebody not to think about buying and selling as the transaction, but really think about homeownership as this series of dozens of little transactions that happen over many, many years, and frankly, should never have a beginning and an end.
Right.
So from a tech perspective, you don't think you're going to replace relationships. You're not. But what you can do is you can help people scale so that they can serve more people in a more personalized, meaningful way and do it with hundreds of thousands of customers at a time, as opposed to manually do it one by one. So to take that a step further,
1 o'clock.
what really inspired us to do Milestones was that industry was missing something really basic. This concept of customer lifetime value. It's like a pretty easy concept to grasp, right? It's like all the money you would make or the value you would derive from a customer, not from a one-off transaction, but across many, many years of multiple transactions. So if you added that all up, think about going to a restaurant. It's not how much you spend dining one time, it's how much you spend dining at that restaurant in your entire life. That's customer lifetime value. And if you bring your friends, then that's obviously going to up that number. Real estate tends to miss this, even though this is like a totally basic concept. Our industry, whether it's an agent or a mortgage lender or a plumber or an HVAC company, it's very transactional. I work with you once and then statistically, never again. So, 80% of the time, there's no repeat business, there's no referral, there's no cross-sell of other services that has really taken hold, maybe north of maybe 25 or 30%. So that business model feels like a hamster wheel where you're constantly having to get new customers because your existing clients aren't coming back to you. And I think we can do better. I know we can do better. And if you flip that and you say, well, what's this like from the consumer's perspective? If they're the source for all the money at the end of the day, it's no picnic to be a homeowner either. This is fun to get a home. It's exciting. But once you own a home, as many of us on this program watching can relate to this very intimately, homeownership is like this messy, river of challenges and expensive surprises, and it's stressful at times. And the sort of tragedy in my own mind is the people who really have the expertise and the local networks to guide you on this journey. Once you get the home, they're kind of like peace out and they're gone after you move in, and you're kind of left to fend for yourself. So in a nutshell, this is what we were doing when we created Milestones. It was to help bridge that gap between consumers and industry and facilitate this ongoing relationship. And we don't think technology is going to do that. What we think technology does is give you leverage to build those long-term relationships and be able to really personalize it and deploy it at scale. That's what technology does. It doesn't really change the fundamental problems that consumers or the real estate professionals have, but it brings them closer together and makes it easier to collaborate.
Well, it's interesting too, because a lot of technology out there today focuses on the sort of from the time there's some mild interest generated from a consumer to the time that the home closes, right? But what you're talking about is a complete circle, right? So once it stops, I shouldn't just say, and I've had this issue myself with our realtor, he just ghosted us. We didn't hear from him again. Maybe we got a calendar from him every other year, some, in irrelevant type of communication. But this type of thing, you could talk to me while I'm getting ready, but most importantly, you can talk to me through the entire process. And then when I might come back around again, I'm still going to remember who you are. I'm going to know who you are. I'm going to appreciate that you helped me when my sewer went bad and I didn't know who to call or whatever the issue might be, right?
And I think it'd be a mistake to think about strictly post-closing. I think about my own neighborhood. There's about 100 homes. This makes it a great sample, right? Every year, about a half dozen of us move.
Right.
And that tracks pretty well the rest of the country. So you wouldn't wait for the half dozen people to move and then say, here's your homeowner experience. If you were clever about it, you'd go to all 100 homes in the neighborhood and say, let me start to engage you now. Let me start to give you some things of value now. Let me start to help build that relationship so that when life forces your hand, which is most people move when life forces their hand, right? They get married, they get divorced, they have kids, their job transfers.
Right.
You want to be way in advance of any of that stuff happening
Exactly.
and start to build those relationships with everybody in the neighborhood or everybody in the area that you work. I think that's really the key. And so post-closing is one thing, but free, free opportunity, if you will, that's, I think, where it's at.
That makes sense. So that leads kind of my next question is how and why do you think Milestones is going to help real estate agents win big? Like, how do they take this and take their current skills and expand their abilities using a product like yours?
Well, let's go back to the basics. Real estate is an industry that is built really on two things. It's built on trust and service. It's always been that way.
Mhm.
So what we do at Milestones is we help enable that at scale. And we're really designed to support industry get closer to its customers, principally people that are living in a home and will eventually move again or borrow again, et cetera. We're trying to help make that connection stronger, not disintermediate. So to win big, the simple answer is you got to build closer relationships. You've got to be in contact with your clients and your prospects, and you got to help people solve real problems. And if you're good at that, and you're good at that at scale, people are going to come back to you and they're going to brag to their friends. That is the way the industry's always been.
Yep.
To do this at scale means you have to have things that give you leverage, right? You can't be hands-on, having personalized conversations frequently with hundreds or even thousands of people at once. There aren't enough hours in the day, which is kind of why the industry hasn't figured this out. So what Milestones does is we help you gain leverage. And I think that's really the key to winning big is provide what feels like very personalized service that never stops to a large number of people, knowing that every year about 5% of them are going to pick up and move and 95% of them aren't.
That makes
Getting
sense.
that right is the key.
So I did a focus group several years ago, and I thought this was a great way to think about things like milestones. This woman said, you know, the most important thing for me, this was to a consumer, was I have to have a great agent, exactly that you said, that I know well and that I trust. But if she has some technology with her that makes our relationship even deeper, it's like a gorgeous suit with a beautiful purse. The accessory makes her ability to be trustworthy and you know, a better servant to me even better. So that's kind of, I think what you're saying, right? Is like, it's a very important adjunct to activity and commitment you already have as a great agent.
Mm-hmm. And gosh, I wish we could replace the word agent with advisor. And I know there's only a few letters difference,
I love
but
that.
I think the notion of an advisor, and you might come up with a better name, that's fine, but somebody who is more like a wealth manager who sticks with you for years, not just, you know, one trade and they're done, but who is actually there actively helping you groom your money or, you know, fine tune the assets you have to your life. That mindset to me always makes a lot more sense. You want to be the go-to for everything that relates to the home, because if that service never ends, then people never forget about you.
And the best advisors, using your word now, I think they own that. They believe that they are advisors. They believe that they're there to support you. And again, from research that we've done, when you come at it, and some agents do, many don't, most don't, luckily, but some come at it as where you're just a paycheck to me. Consumers smell that in a second. They'll say, you know, I've talked to people and I felt like I was just going to be a paycheck for them. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about my needs. They weren't listening to what I needed. They were just trying to get through the deal. And, you know, it doesn't work. So I think those are great. And I love the idea of calling them advisors. I'm going to pick that up. I think that's a great way to reframe what we do. And to the next question, which is, again, we all know right now, buyer's agency as we know it is being, I wouldn't say threatened, but it's being evolved. I don't think it's being threatened necessarily, but it's evolving. So, you know, many people are talking about how does a buyer's advisor create a better understanding of their value, because frankly, a lot of the things that agents do to create value is done behind the scenes on purpose, right? They're trying to make it calm and simple and easy for their home buyer. And yet a lot of the ways they're doing that is because expertise that they've built over the years and, you know, and networks they have and resources that they have. So given all of that, and, you know, I'm asking everyone these questions these days, how can buyer's agents use your product to increase their repeat and referral business and most importantly, increase their overall value proposition.
Ooh, all right, well, this is a biggie. Let's start here. Regardless of how the settlements ultimately shake out, and I think, jury's still out in terms of exactly how this is going to play out, but I think one thing is clear. If you're a real estate professional, you need to simultaneously deliver more value, like actually deliver more value, and you have to communicate your value much more to clients. It's no longer like an optional nice to have, it's going to be required.
Yep.
And as an industry, we really haven't had to do that. Some people are going to get it, and a lot of people are going to struggle with it.
Mhm.
But I want to just shift your thinking for a second. If you've ever bought a new car,
Mhm.
would you ever buy a new car if the dealership was like, listen, once you drive off the lot, we're done here? Like, I'm not going to be around to provide you any support. Maybe I'll mail you a refrigerator magnet or something, or a recipe card.
Right.
If you would never buy a car from whatever, doesn't matter what brand it was, you would do it.
Oh.
So if you're a buyer's agent, I think communicating your value starts way, way, way up funnel, right? During the first presentation you have, there needs to be a pretty crisp articulation of what you're going to do, not only to help a client get a home, but then how you're going to support them during the move, which is for most people kind of a stressful time. And then the long journey of home ownership that follows that, which for most people is years. So, it's been a while since I've been a real estate professional, but if I were to make a pitch to a buyer, it goes something like, hey, to start off, I'm going to be your advisor, and we're going to navigate this minefield of financial and emotional and contractual and logistical stuff that you're going to traverse while you're buying a home. And, the unspoken thing here is you want to minimize remorse or regret and help people stay out of trouble. And a lot of people need that help, right? This is not a straightforward financial transaction. It's a very emotional one, which means it's prone to all kinds of problems. So the first part is I'm going to help you navigate that. The next thing I'm going to do as your advisor is we're going to make sure that that transition, once you're under contract and going all the way through move-in, is as smooth and hassle-free as possible, right? These are times when inevitably something goes wrong. People get stressed out. Some piece of paperwork didn't get filed, or you're missing some piece of documentation, or you forget to transfer the utilities in your name, or your inspection comes back and there's a bunch of red and yellow flags and you don't know which ones you should argue over or not, or should you walk away? Like, there's all this stuff that goes on. And so that's my next value add as an advisor is I'm going to get you through that, and your blood pressure is not going to go through the roof because I got you. And that extends all the way through you moving into the house. And the thing that I think the industry really hasn't done a great job of, and this is where I think we can help, is the last part of that pitch needs to be expanded to say, hey, look, I'm going to stay connected with you, like weekly or monthly, or however often you tolerate hearing from me. And throughout this tenure, I'm going to be this collaborative resource that's proactive, and I'm going to help you build wealth in your home. I'm going to help you take care of your home. I'm going to help you solve problems if they arise, because they will. And I'm not like disappearing at the closing, like you're buying me for the next decade. And life is eventually, you're probably not, I wouldn't say it this way, but you're probably not going to die in your house. You're probably going to move again, and I'm going to be right there to facilitate that when the time is right. So I think it's my old broker used to say, call your clients every week and things are going to be amazing. Well, how many of us really call our clients every week? If you've got thousands of people you're trying to maintain relationships with, you can't. This is where technology helps you. And, this is why I think there's a great win to be had with making it feel like people have personalized service. But obviously you can't go and be a property manager for everybody that you know. That's not going to work. So to summarize, I think it's not about showings and offer negotiation. It's about advisory services that takes the knowledge that real estate professionals already have and the local market expertise and the networks, and applying what they are good at, to solve problems, to reduce risk, to help people build wealth. And the tech side of this is just something that enables this at scale and helps people harness more of that customer lifetime value. That's, I think, really what this is all about.
That makes so much sense. And, there's an article this morning in the New York Times about people quantifying the amount of money they spent for a commission and saying, was it really worth it, right? And so if you look at the value of the commission, as you said, just that relatively short amount of time between I'm interested in a home and I'm purchasing it. But if you take that same amount of capital and you spread that out of the lifetime ownership of the home and all of the support and all of the guidance and all of the counsel and advice you may provide, those numbers seem to be much more tenable, even for those that are buying, less expensive homes, and they don't feel like they can afford the commission as much. So it's a great way to really demonstrate your value for a much, much longer period and build that, lifetime referral relationship where anytime somebody asks them who they should work with, they say you. Of course, anytime you're working with them or that they're going to be doing something, they come back to you, right? Anytime you can take both your referral rates up and your repeat business rates up, that just generates bottom line dollars, right? It's a good way to generate your business.
I wish I could claim that I came up with this concept, but a friend of mine named James Dwiggins was really the person who said, look, if you're thinking about amortizing a $10,000 commission over 4 or 5 months, then people start to question whether you're worth it. If you're amortizing it over 10 years,
Correct.
and saying, this is how I'm going to help you, and here's the things I'm going to do for you, and here's the proof, right? There's got to be some sort of tangible thing, and here's how we're going to communicate, and here's how I'm going to deliver on that promise, and here's why, right? That's got to be part of your pitch.
Exactly.
That feels a lot better than having people who don't really understand your value. They don't know what you do behind the scenes, and you don't do a very good job explaining it to them. And then there's the perception that this is a short window of time as opposed to a longer one. You can solve those problems, but I think it's on the real estate industry at large to be able to really spell that out and then deliver. It can't be an empty promise or people are eventually going to figure it out.
Exactly. All right, so let's go flip to the broker side for the house for a second. So what do you think brokers should be thinking about? Because many of them, of course, at this point are critically evaluating everything in their own tech stacks, especially things related to helping their agents and clients. What do you think that they should be doing to help their agents be more productive and help them and, encourage this whole concept of, customer for life, home ownership for life, full circle of life, whatever words that you want to use for it? What should they be doing differently?
Well, fundamentally, I look at a tech stack as a reflection of a strategy. And in my mind, the strategy has 3 parts. The first thing is you've got to help your agents evolve into advisors. We've already talked about that. I think that's critical. Second thing that I think is important to that strategy is you've got to get closer to consumers and you've got to think about delivering value throughout that whole journey, not just in the months that is the transactional part. And if I'm a broker, the third thing, frankly, I really need to both think critically about and then act on is how do I diversify income beyond just transactions, right? I don't think that for most, strictly brokerage is going to cut it. You've got to be able to bundle other things. And that bundle would include transaction services if you can do it in a RESPA compliant way, but it also would include home services as well. You want to be around for all transactions. Again, large and small, it never ends. The buying and selling of the home are just some of the larger ones at the bookends, but it keeps going, right? If you're a broker, you want to evolve to where you are that, which makes your business a lot more marketable and sellable at the end if you're thinking about ever exiting and retiring, right? So I'm biased, but if I were running a brokerage, I take a platform like ours and I would white label it to make it look like I invented it. I would plug in my CRM and my transaction management system and my website, which are complementary components of the customer experience, but generally these things are for the most part behind the scenes. So I plug that into my version of Milestones, air quotes. Most folks have built up a database over years. That database is probably old and has thousands or even tens or hundreds of thousands of people in it, but I'd load them up into our platform and I'd start engagement. We have clients who are doing this at huge scale. It's working. And then I would embed my partners. So I'd put my mortgage partner, my insurance company, my title company, my home services partners, and I'd sort of build the Amazon for real estate within this ecosystem. And so I do that so that I could deliver this end-to-end experience for buying, moving, owning, and selling. Agents are a huge part of that. I don't think agents are going away, but I think you want to have a customer experience that feels modern and is available and accessible 24/7. So a good example of this is H&R Block. They built their own equivalent of TurboTax, right? But they marry it to advisors who still physically have, brick and mortar offices. And you can walk in and get guidance from a human. You can tinker with it online at 11 at night. And it's just one unified experience. And there are people who are self-serve, and they tend to be self-serve until they hit a question that they can't answer, or they're not confident, and then you need somebody over here to help them. And you want that to all be in sync. So I think things like that, and we've been built for this from the onset, gives you the ability to serve customers in the future. And some of them are going to want full service, and some of them are going to want less service. And long before the commissions lawsuits have sort of pushed us into this, what I think will become kind of an a la carte world.
Yep.
I think you need to be ready to cater to that. Go to a grocery store. You've got some people who are going through regular checkout, and some people who are going through self-checkout, and some people get through self-checkout and they're like, oh man, I can't do this on my own. And there's usually a person standing a few feet away to help, unstick them from where they are. That's going to be the norm for us. So the last thing I would think about if I were a brokerage is all of this is for naught if you don't invest in educating your agents and give them the means to communicate to their clients about what's in it for them, right? There's a long list of amazing technology that agents never adopt because it isn't properly articulated and mobilized within an organization. So if you're a broker, your tech stack is kind of worthless if people don't see value and adopt it. Those are solvable problems, but I think that people tend to think too much about the tech stack and too little about the deployment of it and the build out of that into the culture and the process and the fabric of a business. So I wouldn't forget about that if I were a broker thinking, what do I do with my tech stack in this new world? I challenge anybody who's viewing this, call us and we can help you put this together, and we can do it pretty quick, and we can do it without it costing a fortune, because nobody has a fortune right now to invest in tech anyway. But if you don't invest in getting closer to your customers, especially now, I think that's a problem downstream. I really do.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, if you can help your agents stay closer to their clients, who are your clients, but are their clients as well, that also generates a perceived value for you as the broker, right? It's a retention strategy. In addition to a business development opportunity, it's definitely another way for you to tactically drive home the value that you really are serious about helping your agents continue to be successful over the long haul. So it makes a lot of sense.
Think of it this way. This entire industry is built on trying to find the 5% of people that are going to move every year. That is a classic needle in a haystack problem. You've got to get away from that and help people get closer to the 95% of people who aren't necessarily going to buy or sell a home in the next 12 months, but who are eventually going to do it. And if you do it in large enough numbers, your overall transaction volumes and conversion rates are going to go up. But that's a mindset shift to be able to think in those terms.
Yeah, it's you got to think beyond the next deal. You got to think about the lifetime of your business, their home, the return on investment of that important investment that you're helping them make. And frankly, to me, while yes, it might be a mindset shift, it's not a mindset shift for most agents who absolutely love their customers. Right? Many of them become friends. They may know them through the community, through their child sports teams or whatever else. But the idea of something that helps me continue to be that friend that I want to be anyway seems very logical to me, doesn't it to you? I think it's not a big leap.
It isn't a big leap. I think you just need the tooling to do it, right? In theory, you want somebody to talk to you every time that they have something that you can help them with. in practice, you've got to make that whole thing very efficient because you've got stuff you need to do today and you can't do 100 other things on top of it unless you have a system in place to be able to serve people really quick.
Exactly. So
You can, the banking industry is a great example of this. There are lots of things you can do in your online bank. It doesn't matter who you bank with. And then there are still bank branches and customer service reps and tellers at banks. Like that hasn't gone away. There are very few major banks that have like no physical presence. So there is precedent for this. Same thing for travel.
yeah, the bank's a great analogy because there are some things that frankly, it was kind of a pain to have to work with a human. And if those have been automated and makes it easier, good for you. But when it's something important or something where you truly do need local expertise, you do go to the bank. And that's a great analogy of the way I think this industry can evolve as well. It makes sense. So let's flip over to the side now. If I'm an agent, let's say that there's a, I work with a brokerage that hasn't quite adopted this concept yet, or hasn't really thought about, the holistic value of working with a customer. What advice do you have for them in terms of how technology can help them take their business to the next level?
Well, given where we are right now, I'd say the obvious advice is diversify from buyer leads. Really double down on building and nurturing relationships with future sellers, which is obviously homeowners, and get really, really good at playing the long game and making sure your customers understand that you're by their side and you're always able and proactively willing to deliver value. So that's kind of in a nutshell. Get really good at playing the long game. Doesn't mean you forget about the fact that you need to close business now to put food on the table. But I think you've got to simultaneously do that and get good at playing the long game, much better than you were before. In general, I think the industry chases shiny objects. It's like anything related to like leads, online leads, great, give them to me right now. I'll work really hard and I'll close them. I've lived in that world, and I'll just tell you that there's no such thing as a free lunch. As an industry, I think for the last 20, 25 years, we over-indexed on online leads because it was easier than it was building relationships in real life. If something shows up in your inbox and you're like, call them as quickly as possible, that's easier than going out and making real connections. But let's do a little math here. Last year, there were about 200 million online leads, and there were 8 million transaction sites. It was a down year in real estate, right? There's 4 million-ish transactions, so that means there's 8 million sites. Only about a quarter of these transactions, I think 2 million, were facilitated through online connections. So let's do math. 200 million leads, million transaction sites, that's about 1% conversion. And then the search portal or Google or a lead partner or whatever is in the middle, because usually there's somebody in the middle, they take their cut. And when you factor in the 1% conversion and all the time you spend working to nurture and engage, that 1% means you're upside down. Most online leads are ROI negative at this point. Then if you take and you decouple buyer commissions, then that number gets even worse. And if you kind of just look at the stock prices of anything related to real estate, whether it's Zillow or Compass or anywhere, whoever's publicly traded, if you look at what's happened in the last months and some of the early verdicts of these commission lawsuits hit, the stock price kind of reflects the fact that buyer comp is a tough road ahead. Doesn't mean it's gone, but it's a tough road ahead. So if you're an agent, where are you going to invest? There's only one place to go. You go to the sell side of real estate.
Right.
And you don't abandon the buy side, but you probably shift your focus there. And you really focus on how can you demonstrate value right now and plant that flag on a future transaction and really make yourself that indispensable kind of end all be all resource for everything related to the home. And everything you do from a tech and marketing perspective really should reflect that. And your communications and your messaging and your personal brand, that's got to follow suit. So I see that as being absolutely necessary. I also think that as an industry, we've sort of been like hey, let's put everybody on a drip marketing campaign. It's like, I got an answer. We'll just drip on them until they finally are ready to call me, and they will.
Right?
Yeah, that sometimes works, but I think if you just look at your own inbox, if you're like most people, you go through it once or twice a day, you sweep out all the stuff that feels like it's drip marketing, which for me is like a lot of my email, unfortunately, is like that.
Good. Yeah.
Texting is starting to get there, but it's a little bit better. If you think about your own behavior, now think about the person who gets drip marketing from you as a real estate professional. I think as an industry, we've got to make this a lot more focused and engaging and personalized and timely and relevant and actionable. And that's not a form letter that's the same for every recipient. And so we're really trying to do that at Milestones. We're trying to practice what we preach. We're marrying up content, which is heavily data driven and sort of personalized for what's under each roof. And we're blending that in with a contact center. And we have home concierges that will call you and say, hey, I'm calling on behalf of Marilyn, the real estate agent. And, you've lived in your home for 3 months. How's it going? What do you need? Do you want me to connect you back to Marilyn? Do you need help with X, Y, or Z? And so you want to make that engagement certainly omni-channel, right? Not just drip, drip, drip with email or something like that. And I think you really need to make it personal, and you really need to position yourself as this advocate for, hey, I'm going to help you build wealth in your home, or invest in real estate, or tackle home projects, or show you what's happening in the neighborhood. These are all things that agents inherently know in their head. They have their finger on the pulse of this, but it doesn't necessarily come across in some of the marketing that we do, which is, drip, 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 drip.
Even simple things like, is there a neighborhood association? Is there even an unofficial neighborhood association? Do people, where we have a house down here in Florida and they're doing a fruit tasting at somebody's house. I'm like, okay, that sounds like fun. But the only reason we knew is because we happened to walk by with our dog and they had a dog, right? Nobody ever, an agent never reached out to us and said, hey, let me welcome you to the neighborhood. Let me show you all the neat ways that you can engage. It just doesn't happen. And that local knowledge is so important. It can really make a big difference. I love that. I think you guys are onto something big here.
When we travel, we actually pay people to help us. And it's not a lot of money, frankly, but we pay people locally to do tours, to help. It's kind of why Airbnb is so wonderful, right? Usually your host becomes a bit of a concierge, and they give you indispensable advice for something that will have a meaningful impact on your trip. If you're willing to ask them questions or engage with them and listen to them, they can really help you out. I love a real estate professional as the ambassador to the neighborhood and the helper of getting you through these surprises that you encounter as a homeowner. And I think they're really well suited to do it. And of course, the win for them is you're going to think of them first. And when it is time to enlist their services, they've already earned your trust.
Exactly. That's the key. And it's right back to what you said. So final question for you. And this is not necessarily for the practitioner. Some of them are, but there's a lot of people that that come to RE Technology that have a dream of a new product, are launching a new product, are struggling with launching a new product. What advice do you have for that entrepreneur that's really trying to successfully break into this business and do something to serve the needs of our industry?
Oh man, I feel like I've made every mistake in the book. So I'll try to come up with a few that I've learned the hard way. First, I think if you're entering with a new product or new service, you've got to understand that it's an industry where sales and distribution are kind of the linchpin of everything. Every time I've gone through this, I've underestimated how hard go-to-market really is. And I've sort of thought, because I'm a product guy, that you build a killer product and it's just going to win. It's not.
Build it and they will come is not true. Okay.
Yeah, if you build it, they will come is definitely not true. It isn't true like in other industries where if you make it up into the App Store recommendation with Apple or something like that, you hit the hockey stick, and by virtue of building a good app, you can kind of growth hack your way into awesomeness. That's really difficult to do in our industry. I mean, think about it. A third of the industry comes and goes every year, right? Like real estate professionals and mortgage professionals have really high attrition. And so your customer base is different within, significantly different within like 2 or 3 years. So beyond that indispensable product, I think you need partnerships and a sales force and a bunch of growth hacks, frankly, to be able to get whatever you build to market without costing a fortune, because you can't go and do hand-to-hand sales combat with the, every individual when there's 2 million realtors and mortgage LOs collectively in the industry. And maybe there'll be 1.5 million in a year from now, but that's still a huge number of people. If you're a little tech company, you've got to have ways of reaching people. And usually that's in partnership with people who already have scale and who are already in common use. And it's a narrow group of people that have scale in this industry. It's just kind of how it is. So you're also going to need to understand that your go-to-market partners are probably going to go slower than you want them to.
Always.
So another lesson I feel like we've learned the hard way, in my case, multiple times, is yeah, you might be able to score a distribution partnership with somebody, but if you're their 17th priority instead of number 1 or 2, then your distribution is going to go slower than you think it is. I hate to say it, but that's just hard.
Yep.
Other advice I might give, and this is kind of just off the cuff, but so much comes down to, can you integrate or play nice with something that people already use? So in our world, can you integrate with their CRM? Can you be complementary to a website? Can you tie into a transaction management system? Integrations are hard. And they take much longer than most people realize, and they're never quite what you wanted to start, and then your clients beat them up and you go back to the drawing board. But all that stuff is necessary to get adoption in an industry that's very, very fragmented. And this is the last thing is kind of obvious, but nonetheless, it's real. You need time, you need money, right? Capital and time are huge. These are not businesses for the most part that are built in like a year or 2 and then they're flipped. There are a few examples, but not very many. Usually these prop tech companies are kind of like the overnight success that took 10 years, to quote my friend York Bauer. You got to be in it for a while. And right now, prop tech funding is hard to come by, and everything related to real estate or mortgage is kind of like, whoa, I don't know about that. Where's that going? So if the industry is in a valley, then you've got to have capital partners that are patient and see the long game. And there are fewer of them now than there were 2 years ago.
For
On the
sure.
other hand, just say, look, the industry is in a bit of a crisis. And again, a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So there's a shakeout that's going to happen. And whenever that happens, there's opportunities that are kind of like once in a lifetime, or certainly once in a decade, for new businesses and new platforms to really thrive. And I think that's going to be the case. And if you're an entrepreneur entering this market at this time, just make sure that you're prepared and you're in it for the long haul. But if you get it right, I think this is going to be a great example of this big, really amazing industry has not changed all that much, for me at least, in the last 25 years, but it's about to. And that's exciting if you're an entrepreneur that is able to deliver something of value at a time in transition.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin. Your advice and wisdom and counsel is so needed, and I think your product that you're talking about is going to be a big hit. I love what you're talking about, and the advice of becoming an advisor as opposed to a sales agent, I think is very, very well. It's timely, but it's also really important. So thank you so much. And for all of you that are watching today, thank you so much. If you'd like to get more of Tech Titans, go to our YouTube channel and click the subscribe button and the automatic updates, and we'll be sending these. We'll be going to be doing these regularly, and we're curating them to really be only the best and brightest in the industry. Dustin certainly falls into that category. So we appreciate your time, Dustin, and good luck with everything. I hope that Milestones is a huge success, or excuse me, Homeowner.ai is a huge success.
Thanks for your kind words, Marilyn. And to those watching, we look forward to working with you.
Thank you so much.